Hey everyone, in my capstone course, I want to talk a little bit today about the best way to study for certification. Now, in all honesty, I can't talk about other certifications other than technology. So let me give you a little background, a little information on me and what I had to do to get into this field, right? So I had basically a teaching degree in elementary education. I was working in the tech field. I'd taken a ton of tech classes, but at the time they were only really degrees for programming, and I knew I didn't want to be a coder. I didn't want to program. And so I actually had gotten a job in IT based on the bachelor's degree I had in education, and basically them talking to me and realizing that I had the skills. There was no way to validate what you had back then, which is good and bad. As I was working in the industry, then there was some certifications that came out. Novell was the biggest networking certification at the time. But I started with Microsoft. So I started with Microsoft Windows 95 certification. And honestly, that's where most of my information about how an operating system really works deep down came from, because I had to be forced to learn how an operating system works deep down. Microsoft certifications are tough. They're tougher than CompTIA certifications. After that one, I got a networking certification from Microsoft. And that was much tougher than getting Network Plus certified. Now, just to describe why, because different certifications operate different ways. In this particular situation, first off, there was no testing software. So back then, and you couldn't just get a book of test questions. There was nothing to hone or focus what your attention should be on. Instead, it was pretty much just memorize the book and then try to make those connections of how these different networking components work together so that you could pass the test. And that test was made up of some simple questions and then others that basically you would read a paragraph. So-and-so is doing this and they want to do that and blah, blah, blah. And this is how it's set up. So they would give you basically at the top, this is how this network is functioning. And then they would say, what happens if you modify? So you'd have a bigger paragraph and then a smaller paragraph. What is the answer if you modify these things? And so it was really difficult. You had to really know your stuff because you had to be able to know this is how the network's set up. This is what they're changing. So the answer is, and then select the right answer. And so that was very difficult. Then later on, CompTIA came out with A+. It was probably around that time, but I didn't know about it. And Network Plus. So they came out with those two. So I ended up getting Network Plus and then getting A+, and then getting INET Plus, which they eventually split into a couple of certifications. That's Internet Technologies and Server Plus. And so I got all those different certifications at that time. By the time I start doing that, which is just a few years later, what ends up happening is now you've got cram books, right? That's what it was, just cram this information in. So only cover this information, and here's the question for it. Good and bad in that, right? So they're not as much linking of the material together, which is, very important when you're actually going to do the job. But very, very vital in being able to focus your attention. So I want to help you out here so you guys can get through the information much quicker. And so I'm going to use the Network Plus information. Test out is still what I recommend in that, and that ought to be pretty self-explanatory because CompTIA bought test out. So they bought the premier testing stuff, the premier training stuff, and basically are rebranding and doing what they're going to do with their material. So that kind of gives you the vote of confidence of CompTIA. Their stuff wasn't good enough. They bought test out in order to get the job done. So basically, this is what I would do. And this is going to save people a ton of time. You can go back through the information over and over and over and over again, and you'll eventually get it as you go through it. It's usually not the best scenario to go through the same information over and over again. It's a lot better to go through, a different one. Like if you got access to Cengage, you go through their material covering the same thing, covering Network Plus. But still, that's not the best way to do it. The best way to do it is that you've gone through this information, paying attention as you went along. That's a big caveat there. Because I will have students that approach this very much like they did in high school, which is, well, I was there, but I don't remember anything because I didn't really pay attention to any of it. Right. So you need to make sure that, okay, well, I did pay attention. I tried to grab what I could out of this material. What's the next step? Well, in test out down here, you've got the CompTIA Network Plus N10-008 practice exams. And this is what you need to move to. So we come down into this area and they have different ways that you can prep. Right? They have all these different ways. We have, this is what you need to know, just some facts, stuff, why you should certify, it's all there. You're not going to hear anything different from anybody on the internet. Then you've got your practice exams that are 20 questions, and they just randomly generate these 20 questions. Well, where are those questions coming from? I wouldn't even use these. I wouldn't waste my time on them. What I would do is move down to these, all questions. That's where all these are coming from. Lots of people feel that this is very daunting, but the truth is you're going to save time doing it this way. So let's take a look at domain 1. Domain 1 has 358 questions. Now, because of what TestOut does, these questions are very targeted. They have filtered and filtered. These people go and take the test over and over again. They update this information. That's why I prefer it, because out online, unless you're using a site that's doing the same thing, you can have 600 questions in domain 1 and 300 of them are crap and they just don't matter at all. But you don't know, right? You haven't taken the test, so you don't know what's there. And then if you use that kind of stuff, like, hey, we got 800 questions for domain 2, that's not better. It needs to be focused. And so basically what they've done is, yes, you're going to see repetitive questions that are asking the same kind of concepts. But what they're trying to do is have you totally prepped for each of these domains. And this has been this way forever. As a matter of fact, this is newer within the last 4 or 5 years. And so within my networking class, I always would tell people, hey, you need to just come down. It's time for the final, and you're going to go through these questions. And they really freak out, right? They look at this and they're like, what is that? Like 1,000 questions? What are you talking about, McBride? And I'm like, you want to get certified? This is what you have to do. Now, here's the thing. I'm not saying the goal is to memorize 1,000 questions. That's not the goal. The goal is to learn the information behind the questions. That way, no matter what they do, whatever they throw at you, they modified and changed that question, you're going to get it right because you know the information. Now, how does that help you? So let's jump into network security here. 300 questions within this domain. Thankfully now, this saves it. It didn't used to. You would go through questions and you'd be spending 2 hours and you got halfway through and then you would have to just dump it and start over. Now it'll actually save your progress on that. So let's go through and let's say that, yeah, I took the networking class and I took it as, 2 semesters ago. And I've been kind of perusing things and trying to figure out, just kind of going through the information again, see if I can learn it. And honestly, that's not what I would do. I would go straight to these questions and I'll show you why. Time spent, nice to know, but I don't really care because I'm learning, right? So which of the following is an example of an internal threat? So let's say you read this and you're like, internal threat. I have no idea what they're talking about. Are they talking about the internals of a computer? The internal of a network? What? I don't know what they're talking about. Well, at that point, you don't even bother. You don't bother with reading any of these. You just say, look, I don't know what that is. I'm going to mark something and I want to check my answer right now. And then it tells you a user accidentally deletes the new product designs. But you don't stop there, right? You don't stop and say, okay, that's the answer to that. So an internal threat, that's the answer, because that's not all the internal threats you could get. Basically, what you would be doing is looking and saying, I don't even have any idea of what this means. Now it's time to open another tab and you have, test out material going, or search the internet and say security, what's an internal threat? And right, it's going to list out that topic for you so you can review it. And then you also read all the answers, right? So this is the correct one. Yeah, a user within the organization does something that messes up something. A delivery man is able to walk into a controlled area and steal a laptop. Well, that's an external threat. A server backdoor allows an attacker on the internet to gain access external. A water pipe in the server room breaks. Well, that is a threat, but that's not an internal threat as they're speaking of. And so then they actually give you the explanation. And internal threats are intentional or accidental acts by employees. This is not an employee. Malicious acts such as theft, fraud, sabotage, intentional or unintentional actions that destroy or alter data, disclosing sensitive information through snooping or espionage. This is what's happening in your brain. Having gone through this myself and being in education. I can't pronounce education, apparently. This is what's happening. You read this question, your brain says, I don't have a clue, starts to panic, and actually starts to release adrenaline into your system. This is freaking me out. I need to settle down. I need to control my emotions. I don't know what this is. Right? If you're not feeling that level, then you're not actually even concentrating enough to care, right? You're like, blah, blah, blah. I don't know what the answer is. I don't really care. Well, that's a whole nother issue. You read a question, you don't know what the answer is, and you're like, oh boy, this is something I should know, right? This is something they're going to test me over. Your brain is now ready to learn it. That's why running through this way works better than saying, I'm going to go in and I'm just going to relearn this information. I'm going to go through the chapters again and again and again and again, because your brain is not in that mode. Your brain might be when you start, as you start to read the chapter, it might be in that, but pretty soon you're going to start to lose that. And then that'll fall off. And basically your study was good for 30 minutes or an hour. If you're a really, really good student, an hour. But 30 minutes probably. And now all the stuff you're reading is not doing anything and you're just wasting time. Here, this is focusing you. This is focusing you on, I don't know what this is. Let me read the explanations. That's what I would do. So I would click the button. I don't know. Give me the explanation. Now I look through the answer and I see, oh, okay, yeah, because that fits that explanation. Go to the next one. And you say, which of the following best describes an inside attacker? I think I know a little bit about that. Somebody on the inside that's attacking. So an unintentional threat actor, the most common threat, unintentional. A good individual who tries to help a company see their vulnerabilities, which the following best describes an inside attacker. An attacker with lots of resources and money at their disposal, or an agent who uses their technical knowledge to bypass security. So I would say, you know what? I'm not sure what this is. This one sounds, because it says most common, but maybe they're trying to trick me. So that one sounds good. But I don't know. So let's check my answer. Oh, I got it right. But I was guessing. I actually wasn't guessing, but I guessed on that one. So let me read the explanation. Now, after you get done with the explanation, if you're really like, I don't know what that really means, right? Then you've got to go back, but you have to go back and look at other information to bolster your knowledge. Then you come back to this test. In other words, you don't care how long this takes. You got 300 questions. It's the first time you go through it, not being able to answer much. It's going to take you hours and hours. And again, thankfully, at least I can close it and save my situation. But it's focusing you on, it's focusing your brain on, I need to learn this. Also, the other thing, let's hit one. Which of the following can serve as a buffer zone between a private secure network and an unsecured network? And you look at it and you go, oh, okay, padded cell, screened subnet, and intranet or extranet. Well, those are something that's describing different kinds of access. So I know that. Let's screen subnet, but we'll just check it. Yeah, I got it right. I was pretty confident that it was a screen subnet, so I don't need to learn more about it. And in that way, you're not wasting your time, right? I'm not saying slow your brain down like you would if you were given a biology worksheet and it's basically just a study guide and you're reading through every single question and 80% of it but you're slowing your brain down to focus even on the questions that you know. When you're doing this, you're not doing that. What you're doing instead is you're focusing yourself on what you don't know. And the ones you do know, you answer. Usually you're going to want to check just to make sure. But if you're really, really confident, you just answer it and you move to the next one. In this way, you maximize your ability to learn. And that is really what these tests are about. That's why so many industries, especially in IT and computers, they use this because it's a way to not waste your time. Anybody that jumps straight to this without understanding any of the concepts, not a good idea. That's just not a good idea. But this will help you focus in on concepts you don't understand so you can go through those and go through those and go through those. A lot of it will be just remembering, right? So that's another portion of what we're trying to do is when you go, oh, I remember something about that. I believe this is the answer. You read the explanation. Yeah, that's it. Then you would do that for all 299 questions. And then the next day, come back in the 299 questions and answer them again. So you're going through this until you're getting like 90s or better on all of this information. And yeah, that's a lot. But I'm telling you, it's going to take a lot less time if you use this method than if you spin your wheels kind of going through things and wondering if you've got enough information there. Because again, as long as you're honest with yourself and you come back in, let's go back. So let's say that we're second time through and you're reading this and you're going, which of the following best describes an inside attacker? And you look through again and you're like, gosh, I'm not sure. I think this is the answer, but I'm not sure. Right? Then you're focusing on, I need the explanation. Tell me what the explanation is. And your brain will pick it up. It'll pick it up so much faster than you think. The only thing that you can do that's bad is overstudy. In other words, sit there and go, okay, I'm going to go through this. That just took me 3 hours. So now I'm going to go through it again. And that'll take me another 3, and I'm going to do it back to back. There are a few people that'll benefit. I'm not one of them. Your brain processes information while you're doing other stuff, while you're not even thinking about it. So you go off and do the dishes and you make your lunch and you do whatever, and it's actually processing this information. So you want at least a 12-hour period of break between sessions for the material. So again, just to run down what I would do, what I have done in the past works well, what others will tell you that works well. You find a bunch of test questions. So in this case, we're using Network Plus, and we're not worried about the labs because that's a whole different certification. Sorry, the labs, which is the pro exams. So we're not worried about those. We're going to come down and we're going to go through the big domains, starting with domain 1, and here we go. And when we hit a question we don't know, we guess, right? We make our best guess, and then it explains to us, yes, you got it right, but we guessed. And we're honest with ourselves. We say, I guessed, this is the explanation. Let me read it. That's not enough. I need to go look at more information. And then we move on to the next one. Next one, we know, we don't waste our time with it. Third one, we kind of know, we guess, we read the information. Then when we come back through, we'll likely get all those right? We get the one right that we knew, we know why that's the answer. And then we get the other 2 right because we remember the concept. And again, that's the biggest thing, the concept. So I've dumped a lot of different test questions in there, for instance, in certified investigator, incident handler, sorry, not investigator. And there's a ton of questions. You would do the same thing with it, right? That one is not as interactive, which is not as good. But I let you open it as many times as you want. So you could go through 100 questions and then say, score it and be able to see, oh, I got those wrong. I need to go and study this information. But if you're being honest with yourself, right, you can pull up any test. So if it's not like, show me the answer, you could pull up any test and go, I don't really know. And at that point, you can go look information up. Because again, last thing, I'll say again, you're focusing your mind on what you don't know instead of what you do know. And that's a much quicker way to study anything that you're studying. You've already had the class, you've gone through the class, and if you were paying attention even partially, you've got enough information to come down here and start going through. If you want your brain to click in more on what this is, then right, you come up here and you say, well, what are the objectives of this? And it tells you domain 1. This is everything you're going to cover in domain 1. It tells you everything that you're going to do, right? All of that. Now we're to domain 2. I went too far, right? So if you want to like prep your brain, you can go and look. And yeah, a lot of it you're going to go, I don't know, we got elasticity here and scalability, and I'm not sure. Don't let that bother you. Get into the test and let it tell you, okay, you didn't know that, so let's go learn it. That is my advice for studying any type of certification. If you have to study the certification, you don't know anything about it, yeah, you need to go through a class, you need to watch videos, you need to do whatever you can there. But all this stuff that you should be trying to certify in, you've gone through. Even in the Security Plus exam, which, you know, I don't teach to that exam, Ethical Hacker covers that information. You're going to have a little bit of more boring information, managerial stuff that they didn't cover as well. And, you know, you can use Test Out to make sure that you have those resources. If you have any questions, let me know. And by all means, if you're studying anything and you run into, I don't know what the answer to this is, I wonder if there's something that McBride knows. I have a ton of videos that are out there on I have 2 different YouTube channels because I've moved over to a new one. And I've got things that talk about subnetting, that talk about OSI model, talk about TCP model, all those different little things. And, you know, my plan is to continue to build that. So I have all these things in there too, right? All of it's built in. Anyway, let me know if you've got trouble, and I'll help you out where I can. Talk with you later. Have a good one.